And it's on our YouTube page.
Oh, we are live now, so watch what you're doing.
That's right. Be hard.
Is everybody... But don't roll your eyes. That's the only thing left.
Calissa, you're such a funny girl.
Good afternoon.
Well, I'm an eye roller, so...
All right, I do show 2 o'clock. Everybody good?
Yep.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, I'll call the meeting of the annual budget committee meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Schweitzer, would you like to lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag
Good life of the United States of America. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Calling of the roll, please.
Mr. Schweitzer,
Here.
Mr. Mann,
Here.
Ms. Wager.
Here.
All right, thank you very much. This meeting is being live streamed. We also have an opportunity for public comment. Go with Council Administrator Miller. If you are aware of any communication via email or phone calls for this meeting, would you please provide that for us now?
No, there have not been any communications.
Okay, thank you. Communications from elected officials, other officials, and agencies of the county. Seeing none, we have 2 items of business before us. The request of council 20-015, permission to negotiate a sale of parcel number 84-06-34-251-006.00-002 to Hydrite Chemical Company. We'll do these separately, so we'll start with that one. Do we have representation of this request?
Members of the committee, Michael Wright. With regard to this request, this piece of property, prior to county retaking and Hydrite negotiated the sale of the primary.
Sorry about that. So this first parcel that we're discussing was previously under the ownership of the Terre Haute Quarter Midget Track Association when Hydrite negotiated the sale of the primary track campus with the Quarter Midget Track. This parcel contained a reversionary clause in the deed that returned the property to Vigo County by and through its Board of Commissioners. The county and economic development have been working with an individual named Tom Miazga, who's out of Wisconsin, where Hydrite is headquartered. Their plans for this parcel involve a new personnel office for their operations here in Terre Haute. And based on what we know about things that took place on that property prior to the county taking ownership, there's not the same sort of conditions that the Terre Haute Economic Development Corporation remediated on the Coke Carbon property exist on this property. Those same issues existed between Hydrite and the Quarter Midget Track Association when they negotiated the sale of that property. Hydrite has received a comfort letter from the Indiana Department of Environmental Management regarding their proposed plans for the property. They have had to get an updated Phase 1 to get their Phase 1 expired before the comfort letter was verified by IDEM. And rules require that phase one and the comfort letter be within 1 year of each other. So they had to reinitiate a phase one and are in the process of acquiring another comfort letter from IDEM. So there's more than a couple $100,000 worth of remediation that will need to take place on this property before it could be put to any economical use. And given those set of circumstances and the desire for Hydrite to expand other use for the taxpayers of Vigo County. And this is returning it to a productive use on the tax roll and putting it back in non-government ownership.
Okay, thank you
Are there
very
any
much.
questions?
Any questions or comments? I notice we have two commissioners here with us today, so Commissioner Anderson, welcome. Any questions?
I have none.
So what's the upside, what's the downside?
Well, I'd say the upside is Hydrite has expressed, their. I don't want to speak for their ongoing operations in this COVID-19 environment, but my impression is they have a very large footprint in our community, and they've expanded that footprint within the last 5 years with the acquisition of the quarter midget track. They've put more of their facility to work in terms of scaling up production, and this new parcel will provide them a new place to put some of the office staff that have been displaced by the scale up in their industrial operation. So this is it's probably housing payroll, clerical staff, but it's, a new building to benefit their workforce. And the downside, to be completely honest with you, Councilman, I don't see us, the property is contaminated, so it's not a lot of, there's not a great degree of confidence in my mind that any appraiser is going to deem this as a highly valuable piece of real estate. So I guess the downside could be that there's not going to be a windfall to taxpayers by virtue of this property being worth several $100,000, as it could be if it were not contaminated and capable of, but I think, Hydrite is willing to make that investment in the remediation, but they don't want to not only invest money in that remediation and pay a premium for the real estate. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, I would say that, their willingness to construct a new personnel office on that facility does indicate that they have plans to stay in our community, that they will be paying additional property taxes to Vigo County. And, the upside far outweighs any negative side of the things. And, with that in mind, I would make a motion that we give this a favorable recommendation.
I second that motion.
Okay, so let the record reflect, and I'm going to make sure I'm doing this correctly. This is identified now as Resolution 2020-04. Am I correct by the enumeration of this? Okay, so we have a motion by Councilmember Wager, seconded by Councilmember Schweitzer, to send resolution number 2020-04 to the full council with favorable recommendation. Any other comments or discussion?
None.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Swiger,
Aye.
Mr. Mann,
Aye.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Aye.
Okay, so let the record reflect that this passes this committee 3-0 with favorable recommendation to the full council to begin the negotiation of the sale. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you.
Second item, permission to negotiate to acquire a 6105.30 plus or minus square foot portion of parcel number 84-06-28-202-008.000-002 and a 1,734.64 plus or minus square foot portion of parcel number 84-5. So we have representation again, Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Councilman. The issue here involves the Vigo County Juvenile Justice Center, located just behind this building to the south and east. When this was probably early last year, the hotel adjacent to the juvenile center changed hands, changed ownership groups. And not long after that happened, the new proprietor of the hotel came to the annex and indicated a desire to construct a fence along his property boundary to keep people who are expected to be at the juvenile center from parking on his property, potentially interacting with his guests, or otherwise causing some other disturbance on his property. So when we went back and looked at where the property boundary really exists, if he were to build a fence on that, it would be just outside of the newly constructed entrance to the juvenile center. If you'll recall, sometime last year in an upgrade to the security there, some building renovation was done, a new entrance was constructed, a new breezeway to give them, a little harder barrier there. And that kind of took up an awning of enclosed space that had, previously been a drive-through. But now that property line is right at the entrance to that building. So it would effectively close off that parking lot to people who are required to be at the juvenile center, by court order, and the parking situation would be less than ideal, and even facilitating travel around the entire building would be obstructed because, he would own essentially just outside of the front door. So the county engineer and the county commissioners decided that, some contact should be made to try and gauge their interest. And, if they want to build a fence, that's perfectly legitimate and they're within their rights to do that. But let's talk about where that fence should be built, and taking into consultation Hannum, Waggle, and Klein and their property line in that issue as well. So this is the, we have obtained a legal description on the property from Myers Engineering. We've attempted to bargain and make contact informally and all of those things that might bring about a little smoother process. But up to this point, and as I said, it's now stretching on a year probably, we are not any closer than when we started. And this is the first step in the formal process of potentially acquiring the property by eminent domain. And while negotiations are free to continue and, trying to work towards a common understanding, I think allowing the first formal part of that process to start, which is just a letter indicating why the property is needed for a public purpose, and that want to make it as smooth as possible, and that could change the tune of where we're at. But this is really just that parking lot being primarily occupied by people going to the juvenile. Might not be the case in the future. Some solution needs to try and come about. So.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
None.
And the only other thing I'd say, members of the committee, is, this was the bare minimum of what the engineer and the commissioners felt like could be. I mean, this is not any more than what's necessary just to promote, the capability to service every portion and have some room to work around all sides of the building and allow some parking out front. And this would bring it in line with the other portion of that hotel group's property boundary. I mean, if you look at the parcel on Beacon, you'll see there's a little jaunt out into just a little nook, basically, of where the property line goes. And this is just lining that up back to the boundary with Hannum, Waggle, and Klein.
President. Mr. Wright, do you believe that this will be a resolution for the problem?
Yes,
And you think you can work it out?
I do. I think that, the process is set up to get worked out. It involves, a degree of giving both sides the opportunity to respond to one another. And so, yes, I'm confident. I'm sure, as everybody is dealing with, in this current environment, he's got more important things on his mind. And, this is just, as I said, the first step. It's not doing anything other than giving the commissioners the authority to appoint appraisers to evaluate the value of that property.
Mr. President, with those considerations, I would make a motion to give this a favorable recommendation to the council.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, I will second.
Okay, thank you. Before we vote, a couple
Yes.
questions real quick. The
Sure.
fencing that's up there now, we put up?
There is no fence there now.
Yeah, the barricade.
The barricade,
Oh, I'm sorry.
we put those up.
We put the,
He granted
and not wanting anybody else to be towed, yeah, those barricades were put up.
Fair to say that the busiest time for the juvenile center is when court is in session?
Definitely.
So during those opportunities, that's when you need to have maximum parking presence,
For sure.
okay? Will this acquisition by the county, if it were to happen, require rezoning of any type?
No. It's not, because it's not it's a subdivision of an already existing parcel. We're not acquiring an entire parcel. It's just a portion of, and because we're adjacent, if we acquire it, it gets the zoning that we have tied to our property.
Okay. And then my last question, where do the commissioners anticipate the funds will come from should the county vote to acquire this land? Where's the ultimate source?
Well, I would be speculating to answer that question. I mean, my instinct would probably be just county general, but they could expound on that. They feel differently.
And what we're being asked to do is get the ball rolling. There is no definitive response from this committee nor the council
No.
on what will happen to that land once negotiations come to an end and a price is agreed upon. The council will have to make that determination.
Correct.
But we do know that in these times of reduced tax revenue, that decisions will have to be made on any
Yeah.
vote that's coming, that we always do.
Yep.
But just want to throw that out there. So we have a favorable recommendation motion to the council for Resolution 2020-05 by Councilmember Wager, seconded by Councilmember Schweitzer. Anything else before we vote? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Schweitzer?
Aye.
Mr. Mann?
Aye.
Ms. Wager?
Aye.
Okay. Let the record reflect a 3-0 favorable vote to the full council for this resolution.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright, and Commissioners Anderson and Anderson. Anybody else have anything for the good of the group?
It's good to be back.
It is. It's good to be back and meeting, and we'll do it all again tomorrow night, I guess. All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you, everybody.
Turn your mics off.